There is a provision in the Nigerian Constitution, Section 188, that was designed to protect democracy. It gives a state legislature the power to investigate a governor suspected of gross misconduct. It sets out a clear process. A majority of lawmakers sign a notice, the Speaker forwards it to the Chief Judge, the Chief Judge constitutes a 7-member panel, the panel investigates, the legislature votes. A clean constitutional process for accountability. In Rivers State, between 2023 and 2026, this provision was invoked 3 times against the same governor, not because he was found guilty the first time, not because the process was completed, but because each time it was used and each time it stalled, was withdrawn or was blocked, it served a purpose that had nothing to do with accountability. It was a constitutional lever, and it was pulled and released and pulled again, not to remove a governor, but to break one. This is the final chapter of the Fubara-Wike story, the constitutional battle that ended not with a vote, not with a court verdict, but with a peace deal that no one published and an agreement that Wike enforced from an office he was never elected to. Stay with me, because this is the full story. Ninja Brief tells the full story, not the fragments. Subscribe now and let's finish this. Section 188 of the 1999 Constitution is not long. It runs to 11 subsections, but it contains everything you need to understand what was done to Siminalayi Fubara. The first time it was invoked against him was in October 2023, barely 5 months after he was sworn in. 24 lawmakers loyal to Wike signed an impeachment notice. The allegations were broad. The move was withdrawn in December 2023 after President Tinubu brokered a first peace intervention. The second time was in March 2025. This invocation escalated further than the first. It triggered or provided cover for the declaration of a state of emergency. Tinubu suspended Fubara, his deputy Ngoziodu, and all the legislators. An unelected sole administrator ran Rivers State for 6 months. The third time was January 8, 2026. 26 lawmakers led by Majority Leader Major Jack presented formal notices of gross misconduct against both the governor and his deputy to the House presided over by Speaker Amaiwe. The allegations this time were enumerated in 7 counts: demolition of the Assembly complex, extra budgetary spending, withholding funds due to the Assembly Service Commission, disobeying the Supreme Court's ruling on legislative financial autonomy, failure to present the 2026 budget, and 2 further counts of unconstitutional expenditure against Deputy Governor Odu. The 7 allegations were not trivial on their face. Some had genuine constitutional grounding. Budget presentation is a constitutional obligation. Obedience to Supreme Court orders is non-negotiable. But here's what the 7 allegations do not tell you. Each one had a mirror image. The Assembly complex was damaged, but courts had found that the 27 lawmakers had themselves created the governance conditions that preceded the damage. The budget had not been presented, but the Assembly itself had adjourned indefinitely when Fubara attempted to present it. The Supreme Court order had not been complied with, but the Assembly had locked the gates when Fubara arrived to comply. Every allegation cited Fubara's breach. None acknowledged the Assembly's role in producing the conditions that produced the breach. That asymmetry is not accidental. It is the constitutional weapon being deployed. The third impeachment process hit its constitutional wall almost immediately. On January 16, 2026, 8 days after the notice was presented, Justice Florence Fiberesima of a Rivers State High Court issued an interim injunction. The order was precise. The Chief Judge, the Speaker, and the Clerk of the House were all restrained from taking any further steps in the impeachment process for 7 days, pending a full hearing. The Rivers State House Assembly's response was immediate. Spokesperson Enemi George told journalists that the court had no power to issue such an order. He cited Section 188, subsection 10 of the Constitution, which states that courts cannot question or intervene in any matter relating to the impeachment process while it is ongoing.
In the Assembly's reading, the court's injunction was unconstitutional on its face. Then, something remarkable happened. The Chief Judge, Justice Simeon Chibuzo Amadi, received the Assembly's letter dated January 16th, requesting him to constitute the required 7-member investigative panel. He acknowledged receipt, and then he wrote back to the Speaker on January 20th, 2026, with a letter that is now one of the most important constitutional documents in Rivers State's political history. He told the Speaker he could not act. His hands were, in his own words, fettered. He had been served with 2 interim injunctions. His office had been served with notices of appeal filed by the Assembly at the Court of Appeal. There were subsisting orders of court directly connected to the impeachment process. He could not, lawfully, constitute the 7-member panel while those orders stood. He cited the bedrock principle that undergirds every constitutional democracy. All persons and authorities must obey subsisting court orders regardless of their personal view of the order's correctness. The Assembly chose to press forward anyway, and then on February 19, 2026, announced that it was suspending the impeachment proceedings, not dropping them, suspending them pending the outcome of ongoing litigation and broader political consultations. In the language of Nigerian politics, that suspension was not a retreat, it was a held threat. By February 2026, President Tinubu had intervened in the Rivers State crisis a 4th time. Each previous intervention had produced an agreement. Each previous agreement had held for a while. The first peace deal in December 2023 held until March 2025. The second deal, brokered ahead of the end of emergency rule in September 2025, held until December 2025, when Fubara defected to the APC. The third intervention, following Fubara's defection and the resumption of assembly hostilities, produced a January 2026 meeting at the presidential villa involving Tinubu, Fubara, and Wike. None of these agreements was published. No terms were disclosed to Rivers State residents. No text was released to the press. No National Assembly committee reviewed the conditions. The people whose governance was being negotiated, the 9.8 million residents of Rivers State, were informed of the outcomes only through political statements, post-facto announcements, and leaked accounts from anonymous sources. Here is what is now known of the terms, assembled from multiple senior sources across 5 months of reporting. Fubara would join the APC, which he did in December 2025. The Amwehule Assembly would halt its impeachment proceedings, which it did with the February 2026 suspension. Fubara would not seek re-election in 2027, a condition that would only become publicly verifiable in May 2026. And in exchange, governance would be restored. Budgets presented, commissioners screened, projects continued. What makes these terms extraordinary is not their content, it is their nature. They were not legislative, they were not judicial, they were not electoral. They were private agreements between a sitting governor, his predecessor, and the President of the Republic, mediated outside every constitutional institution that determined the political future of an oil-producing state with a GDP larger than most African nations. The Constitution of Nigeria does not have a section for this. Now, drop a comment below. Should these peace deals be publicly disclosed to Rivers State residents? I want your honest answer before we get to the part that changes the calculation entirely. For 3 months after the February suspension, the peace appeared to hold. Fubara continued governing. The Ring Road project, originally initiated by Wike, was inspected and credited publicly by Fubara to his predecessor, a gesture that was read as deliberate political goodwill. The commissioner screening backlog, stalled by the crisis, began moving again. The 2026 budget, blocked for months, was eventually passed through a process that represented a functional, if uneasy, accommodation between the executive and the legislature. Then, in May 2026, Fubara's political allies moved. a group of elders led by House of Representatives member Awaji Abiante purchased APC governorship nomination forms for Fubara's behalf. The message was clear. The governor was preparing to contest the 2027 primary, peace deal or not. Wike's response came within days, and it was surgical. His allies, Dax George Kelly and Kingsley Chinda, picked up APC and PDP governorship forms respectively. The APC Rivers primary process was steered toward the Hope Uzodinma-chaired screening committee, which, as previously reported on this channel, cleared 28 of 28 Wike-loyal assembly candidates and blocked nearly every Fubara-aligned aspirant. The message was equally clear. You cannot win the primary because we control the process. On May 25, 2026, Fubara withdrew. His statement spoke of peace, unity, and stability. He said he had consulted widely. He said Rivers State was bigger than any individual. Within hours, Wike stood before journalists in Abuja, in front of an Abuja road project far from Rivers State, and delivered what amounted to a verdict. He said he was not surprised. He said Fubara ought not to have collected the form in the first place. He said the agreement had always been clear: no second term in exchange for no impeachment. He praised Kingsley Chinda by name, publicly, unprompted, as the right material to govern Rivers. The former Rivers governor confirmed that part of the reconciliation deal included shelving impeachment threats against Fubara on the condition that he would not pursue a second term. A minister from Abuja determining the next governor of Rivers State, from an office he was never elected to. Let us be precise about what the Nigerian Constitution says and what it does not say. Section 188 grants state legislatures the power to impeach governors for gross misconduct. It sets out a procedural framework, a 7-member panel, a vote, due process. What it does not say is that this power can be triggered 3 times without completion as a tool of political attrition. The Constitution assumes good faith use of the provision. It was not drafted for a scenario where the same allegation is filed, withdrawn, refiled, suspended, and held in reserve as an indefinite threat. Section 305 grants the President the power to declare a state of emergency under defined conditions. It requires National Assembly ratification. What it does not say is that governance collapse engineered through political sabotage of a legislature constitutes the kind of emergency the provision was designed for. The Constitution assumes emergency rule is a last resort for security breakdown, not a crisis management tool for intra-APC power disputes. And the Constitution is entirely silent on peace deals brokered at the presidential villa between a sitting governor and a minister who holds no elected position in the relevant state, producing binding commitments about who may and may not contest future elections. This silence is the most important constitutional fact in the entire Rivers State story. Because what it means is this: the operating system of Rivers State governance between 2023 and 2026 was not the written constitution. It was a parallel system of private agreements, political coercion, and institutional manipulation, enforced not by law, but by access to power.
And that parallel system produced real consequences for real people. A ring road stalled, commissioners absent from desks, health budgets unpassed, civil servants in uncertainty, a market woman in Rumuola falling into an uncovered gutter on an abandoned road project while 2 political camps fought over who controlled the next election cycle. The Constitution did not protect her. The peace deal did not mention her. Nobody in any of the 4 presidential villa meetings asked about her. That is the constitutional crisis that nobody is naming. The Fubara-Wike battle is formally over. Fubara will complete his term. He will not contest in 2027, not because the electorate chose someone else, but because a private agreement extracted under the threat of a constitutional weapon made it impossible. Wike's preferred candidate, Kingsley Chinda, is the APC governorship front-runner. The 2027 Rivers governorship is being decided in Abuja. in meetings by a man who has not been elected to anything in Rivers State since 2019. But here is what the final chapter of this story also contains, and what gets missed in the noise. Fubara governed. In the gaps between the crises, between the impeachment notices and the court injunctions and the peace deal negotiations, he promoted civil servants, increased salaries, paid pensioners, boosted the health sector, and pushed infrastructure projects forward. His deputy speaker's own critics acknowledged the ring road was progressing. His administration was imperfect, politically reckless at moments, and unable to escape the structural trap that had been set for him. But he governed. And the question Rivers people must answer, not in Abuja, not in a peace deal, not in a Supreme Court chamber, is what kind of governance they want next. Not which faction controls the assembly, not which name is on the APC ballot, but what governance actually means for the 9.8 million people who live, work, trade, and raise children in the treasure base of the nation. The constitutional battle is over. The democratic one is just beginning. Share this video with anyone who wants to understand what really happened in Rivers State, the full story, not the fragments. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.